Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Lots of big news breaking this morning. First of all, we have some brand new details about that horrific hammer attack on Paul Pelosi. We'll break all of that down for you. We also have some new numbers about the midterm election showing that Republican messaging does seem to be taking a toll, landing a little bit more effectively with voters than Democratic messaging, or lack thereof, perhaps, is really landing. We also have new developments out of Ukraine, especially with regards to that grain deal that Russia and Ukraine had struck that was allowing at least some grain to be exported out of the country. That has changed. We also have new reports of attacks throughout the country this morning, so we'll break all of that down for you. Big news with regards to Elon Musk and Twitter, even some new developments this morning about what some of Musk's first moves might be. And we have the results out of that big presidential election down in Brazil. Lula will be the next president. What does that mean? How close was it? Were the polls right or wrong? What does it all mean? We'll get into all of that. And plus, very excited to have Ken Klippenstein here in the studio. Dude just has gotten some crazy scoops lately. And this one, I think you all are going to be very, very interested in. You remember that whole misinformation governance board thing that supposedly was dismantled? Well, they still decided to do the same thing. They're just not calling it that. And the details of exactly what they are working with tech companies to censor are quite chilling. So he will break all of that down for you in an exclusive for us. But we wanted to start with the new details of that attack on Paul Pelosi.
That's right. So lots of questions around that attack. Emily and Ryan did a great job in a snap reaction on Friday. So let's start with the details. We want to start at the very beginning because I know there's still quite a bit of speculation, questions about details that were erroneously reported and such. And we'll start at the very beginning with the San Francisco Police Department. Here was their initial response as to what happened in that attack on Paul Pelosi. Let's take a listen.
At approximately 2:27 this morning, San Francisco police officers were dispatched to the residence of Speaker Nancy Pelosi regarding an A-priority well-being check. When the officers arrived on scene, they encountered an adult male and Mr. Pelosi's husband, Paul. Our officers observed Mr. Pelosi and the suspect both holding a hammer. The suspect pulled the hammer away from Mr. Pelosi and violently assaulted him with it. Our officers immediately tackled the suspect, disarmed him, took him into custody, requested emergency backup, and rendered medical aid. The suspect has been identified as 42-year-old David DePepe. The motive for this attack is still being determined. Mr. DePepe will be booked at the San Francisco County Jail on the following charges: attempted homicide, assault with a deadly weapon, elder abuse, burglary, and several other additional felonies.
So, important stuff. A, getting charged with attempted burglary, attempted homicide. B, that there was a phone call and a wellness check. There were a lot of questions as to why exactly this was a response as a wellness check, and then the suspect's name, David DePape. Now, in terms of how Paul Pelosi is right now, let's put this up there on the screen. This was a Dear Colleague letter sent by Speaker Pelosi to all of her House colleagues yesterday. I'll read it in full. She says, "Dear colleague, yesterday morning a violent man broke into our family home, demanded to confront me, and brutally attacked my husband Paul. Our grandchildren and I are heartbroken and traumatized by the life-threatening attack on our pop. We are grateful for the quick response of law enforcement. Please know the outpouring of prayers. We are comforted by the book of Isaiah. Do not fear, I am with you. Do not be dismayed, or I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand. We thank you and pray for the continued safety and well-being of our family." Now, the Pelosi family also previously had said that Paul Pelosi had undergone brain surgery. However, his doctors and others saying that he's expected to make a full recovery, 81 years old. Now to question of the attack itself. Let's put this up there. This was one of the major details with a lot of questions. Politico erroneously reported and said, quote, "Officers arrived at the house, knocked on the front door, and were led inside by an unknown person, where they discovered DePape and Pelosi struggling for the hammer. And after they instructed them to drop the weapon, DePape took the hammer and, quote, violently attacked Pelosi." So there were a lot of questions there as to who is this unnamed third person? Why was the third person also in the house? However, now, in an interview, let's put this up there on the screen, details getting clarified. Quote, San Francisco PD telling NBC that they were just 2 people in the Pelosi home at the time of the attack, not 3 as had previously been reported, and that neither the suspect nor Paul Pelosi knew each other prior to the attack. NBC also said that they had confirmed, quote, zip ties were found on the scene. So that was a follow-up on a report about the zip ties as well. As to how exactly and why this was dispatched as a, quote, wellness check, there were a lot of questions as to why this was a wellness check and why didn't Paul Pelosi call 911. Let's throw the next one up there. Essentially what happened, and this is again according to Pelosi, and some of the initial details and all that were a little bit unclear. What happened is that Pelosi told this guy that he wanted to go, David DePape, that he wanted to go in to use the bathroom. So while he was in the bathroom, secretly called 911 and then left 911 on speaker, essentially, and while he put the phone in his pocket, and then went back and was like, hey, what are you trying to do to me? What are you doing? Why are you here? The 911 call operator listens to this and was like, something fishy and weird is going on here right now, Krystal. And she then dispatches it as a, quote, high priority wellness check. That's why it was called in as a wellness check and not necessarily as a confirmed attack. So
it seems like
lots of details.
Right,
Yeah.
and it seems like this is also the reason why in the 911 call, there was a report that this was someone he knew, that it was a friend.
Right,
and it was also sort of contradictory because it was like, they don't know each other, but he says he's a friend. It seems like that confusion may also have come from the fact that essentially what they're saying happened with Paul Pelosi is he was able to dial 911 but wasn't able to say to them like, oh my God, I'm under attack, help me. He's just able to put it on speakerphone so that they can hear the events unfolding. And he's trying to communicate with his attacker in a way where the 911 dispatcher understands like, oh shit, there's something going on. We got to go help this guy. So originally, for those who have a healthy skepticism of official narratives,
including me,
I would say that the big question marks were this report that there was another person at the house was like, why, who, what's going on there? The 911 call where the attacker was referred to as a friend, the fact that it was dispatched as a wellness check. And then there was also another erroneous report that the two men were in their underwear. And there are all kinds of salacious conspiracies out there that this was a gay lover that attacked him. There was a report that Elon Musk, we'll get to that, shared from this sort of like, rag that puts out all kinds of crazy stuff all the time. That was to that effect. At this point, it seems like those conspiracy theories are much more sort of like cope from conservatives who don't want to acknowledge that there was anything ideologically about this guy that may have, mixed with his mental illness to lead to this kind of attack. Because one by one, each of those pieces is at least being debunked by the San Francisco Police Department. And, it seems like I continue, look, I'm open to the idea that there was something else going on here that, is more than has been told or more than meets the eye, et cetera, et cetera. But probably the most likely explanation is that you had a guy who's a drug addict, who is mentally ill, who has fallen down a million different internet conspiracy theory rabbit holes and ended up in this like deranged state. Now, the question I still have is like, where the hell was the security? I mean, that's what's most surprising to me is like, I am shocked that it would be this easy to gain entry to the Pelosi home. But that's basically, that's what we know this morning.
I'm very open in asking questions, as everybody knows. That's why we spent a lot of time actually putting all these details together.
Yeah.
Like, here's the things that were reported that a lot of people were picking up on, including me. I was like, hey, this is very strange. This is very odd. And I think it does stem from the unbelievable nature of, the idea that you could break into a person's home who's worth over $100 million in a $6 million house in a violent city where crime is way up, and that they don't have any security. I mean, listen, any normal dad who has a Ring alarm has better security, apparently, than these people. So that's a little odd. There's no security camera footage. Allegedly, the sliding glass door was broken, or at least at some part.
Yeah, there were pictures of that.
Right, and it's like, well, if you break my door, same thing. Like, I'm just a guy who can order stuff on Amazon. Like, that's going to dispatch a 911 call. So how exactly does that work? So anyway, I remain incredulous and really like stunned that it's even possible for like a violent break-in or something like this to happen to people who have extraordinary high net worth and third in line to the presidency. Although I guess you should generally always bet on incompetence in some of these situations. In terms of the reports, look, again, I mean, I'm sympathetic and, and stuff coming out on this, I was like, this whole thing just doesn't add up. However, according to the police, And that's a very strong caveat. You know, many of these things are no longer there. I think, and you brought this up this morning, at the end of the day, the body camera footage actually will tell us a lot.
Yes.
It'll tell us everything, you know, exactly whether that detail is true. Did he start attacking him when they got there? Did he attack him before? What the position they found themselves in? Who broke the door? Some people said the police broke the door. Some people said that it was David DePop that broke the door. Also, questions remain about Mr. DePop himself, we're about to get to, as well as, you know, his own like craziness and mental conspiracy, combined with obviously a penchant for going down internet rabbit holes.
Yeah.
Put that together, I think it's a sad attack. I mean, at the end of the day, look, I don't wish the man ill. He's 81 years old. That's a tough time to get attacked with a hammer and have to recover in the hospital.
I would say so.
I would say at the least.
I mean, the just derangement of attacking an 80-year-old man with a hammer is
it's crazy.
I mean, it really is. And you know, it's not uncommon for in the wake of any of these sorts of events, whether it's a shooting or a crime or an attack like this, for some of the details to be a little garbled in the beginning.
Right.
And so probably the most likely explanation for why some of these pieces were kind of head-scratching is that, listen, again, I remain open to the idea if the body camera footage comes out and it shows some other things were going on, I wouldn't be shocked by that. But to me, at this point, Occam's razor of what likely happened is that they, you know, let their guard down with security, which is hard to wrap your head around, but certainly possible. Nancy, I guess, was out of town, so the Secret Service detail that normally accompanies her wouldn't have been present.
Yep.
And that this dude, you know, was a toxic combination of like deranged, mentally ill, and then fueled by these right-wing conspiracy theories. And we also should say, like, there's an incentive. Part of the people who are propagating these conspiracy theories and really latched onto them, well, it's because they don't want to acknowledge that any of the ideological parts that came from the right may have had anything to do with this attack. The thing that always drives me crazy about these incidents, and we have just like, you know, every time it's the same thing. Everybody goes to the internet, looks at what their social media history is. This guy was a prolific writer. He previously had been more of like, you know, sort of left-wing fringe lunatic, seems to have made a change. Apparently, reportedly, Gamergate shifted him to the right. Now he was all in on QAnon. He wanted Trump to pick Tulsi Gabbard as his vice presidential nominee. He was into, you know, the obsession with like the pedophilia that comes out of QAnon. And the Epstein stuff certainly is true, but there are parts of that. They think that politicians are like eating babies and all this sort of stuff. He went down every internet rabbit hole. You combine that with the mental illness, and I think that seems like the most likely explanation for what ultimately happened here. I mean, we have some of the details about what exactly he was writing. Let's go ahead and put this next up on the screen. They haven't been able to totally verify that these writings were him, but he seems to be the only person by this name living in California. It seems like it goes back to him. You know, he was in on like anti-Semitic conspiracy theories suggesting there had been no mass gassing of prisoners at Auschwitz. He reposted a video lecture defending Adolf Hitler. Like I said before, he was, you know, picking vice presidential candidates for Donald Trump. He also had, though, things that weren't political at all. Things like, you know, he was like imagining there were fairies that he had produced using an artificial intelligence imaging system. He was tracking culture war issues, talking about Alex Jones's $1 billion defamation judgment. So those are the sorts of, you know, political content that he was apparently interested in. And then, of course, the report from the scene is that he was saying, "Where's Nancy?" And that's why people are drawing this conclusion that his ideology connected to the attack. Although we should be clear, the police haven't said that they have not asserted a motive yet. So I think that's important.
Well, I mean, look, is the motive belied by the fact that she's a speaker? Of course, like it has to be part of the reason from what we've seen right now. I mean, look, it's also San Francisco. It's not a crazy idea to have a crazy person break into your house as a homeless drug dealer.
Yeah, but when you're running around with a hammer and these kind of postings and you're saying, "Where's Nancy?" I mean, there's a pretty logical conclusion.
Can you put two and two together? Yeah, I think so. I mean, just in general, this like disgusting dash by everybody to go and see like what somebody used to watch and then blame it on that person as to their motive for the attack, I generally think is insane. Like, you know, look, people are crazy in this country. There's like 330 million people. Like, it's not always about ideology. It's not Bernie Sanders' fault that James Hodgkinson like shot up a bunch of congressmen just because he happened to like Bernie. Like, it reminds
me of the Gabby Giffords shooting,
same
where
thing.
this guy, there was an ideological component combined with mental illness, and you know, all of these things like. there's a real human desire to understand how someone could do this thing. And the truth of the matter is, you're never really gonna get what leads a person to attack an 80-year-old man with a hammer. Like, you're never really gonna be able to wrap your head around it. Now, some of these attacks that we've seen were much more, like, clearly ideological. They write a whole manifesto and they lay out, like, I'm a white supremacist and I want to start a race war. And mental illness may be a factor there, but it's actually less of a factor than they've convinced themselves that they're some, like, warrior for their race or whatever ideological nonsense that they've fed themselves on. And then there's instances like this where, you know, the mental illness combines with the ideological inclination to lead to this, like, hate-fueled attack, and you really can't separate the two. And it sort of irritates me when people want to latch on to just exclusively one explanation or the other because it's convenient for whatever their particular hobby horse or narrative ultimately is. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.